The fog lifted slowly from the valley as if the land itself were deciding whether to reveal its secrets. Morning light crept across the frostbitten grass, turning each blade into a thin shard of glass, brittle and shining. At the far edge of the ranch, where the fences leaned with age and the hills folded inward like tired shoulders, the mare stood unmoving. She was dark with sweat and birth, her flanks trembling, her ears pinned flat with a warning older than language. Jonah Hale stopped where the gravel met the mud. He had learned that rushing only made wounds worse. His life had been shaped by waiting for letters that never came, for apologies that dried up before reaching his door, for the ache in his chest dull enough that he could breathe without thinking about it. He held his hands low and open, though he wasn't sure who the gesture was for, the horse or himself. The mare stamped once, sharp and furious, and Jonah felt it in his bones. She was not feral. He could tell by the cut of her muscles, by the faint scar where a brand had once lived before someone burned it away. This was an animal that had known people and learned, carefully, not to trust them. Steam rolled from her nostrils in short, panicked bursts, and behind her, half hidden in the fog, something small shifted. Jonah took one step forward and then stopped. The air carried the smell of blood and wet earth, metallic and raw. He had seen births before, dozens of them, but none that felt like this, heavy with dread and purpose. The mare turned her head just enough for him to glimpse what she was guarding, and his breath caught hard in his throat. The foal lay curled in the grass, slick and shaking, its legs folded at wrong angles beneath its body. One eye fluttered open, cloudy with exhaustion, and the other remained stubbornly shut. The foal's chest rose and fell in uneven rhythm, as though life itself were something it had to remember how to do. Jonah felt the instinct to retreat, the quiet voice that told him some things were already decided before anyone arrived. The mare lunged forward, teeth bared, and Jonah stumbled back, heart hammering. He could leave. He should leave. There were protocols for this, numbers to call, people better equipped to handle what was clearly a losing fight. He imagined the long walk back to the house, the coffee cooling on the counter, the day folding back into its usual, manageable silence. No one would know he'd been here. No one would ask him why he hadn't stayed. But the foal made a sound then, thin and reedy, barely more than breath dragged across glass. It wasn't loud enough to be a cry, yet it cut through Jonah with surgical precision. He knelt without planning to, the cold soaking instantly into his jeans, grounding him the moment he was trying to escape. The mare's muscles bunched again, ready to strike, but Jonah didn't move closer. He stayed where he was, hands resting on his thighs, eyes lowered. "I won't," he murmured, not sure what promise he was making. The mare snorted, suspicious, her gaze never leaving him. Time stretched, elastic and fragile. The fog thinned another degree, revealing the small rise of the foal's ribs, the tremor that passed through his body like a current searching for ground. Jonah thought of the night his wife packed a single bag and left the porch light on behind her, as if she might come back once she remembered something she'd forgotten. He remembered standing in that same doorway long after the light burned out, afraid that if he moved, the last proof of her existence would disappear. Grief, he had learned, was not loud. It was a watchful thing. It stayed between you and the world and dared anyone to cross. The mare shifted, placing herself more squarely between Jonah and her foal, but she did not charge. Her eyes flicked to the foal and back again, measuring, calculating. Jonah felt a subtle change in the air, a loosening, almost imperceptible. He slid his jacket off and placed it on the ground, far enough away to be safe, close enough to matter. Then he leaned back on his heels and waited. Minutes passed, or maybe years. The foal's breathing steadied just a fraction, as if the weight of being seen had eased something inside it. The mare lowered her head an inch, then another, her ears lifting from their flattened rage into wary alertness. Jonah's chest ached with the effort of staying still, of not demanding more than what was being offered. A sound drifted across the field then, the crunch of boots on frost. Eli, the ranch's oldest hand, had come up behind Jonah without a word, as he always did. He stopped short when he saw the scene, his weathered face tightening with understanding. Jonah didn't turn. He didn't need to. This was not something that could be explained aloud. The mare stamped again, but it lacked the violence before. Eli raised his hands and stepped back, retreating without question. Respect, Jonah thought, was sometimes nothing more than knowing when not to insist. The fog finally broke, sunlight spilling fully across the field, illuminating the truth of what lay between them. The foal tried to rise. Its legs buckled, folding beneath it, and for a terrible second Jonah thought that was it, that the effort itself had been too much. The mare whinnied softly, a sound stripped of fury and sharpened into fear, and Jonah surged forward on instinct before stopping himself just in time. He stayed where he was, trembling with the need to help and the knowledge that helping meant waiting. Then the foal tried again. Its body shook, every movement negotiation with pain, but somehow it found balance, however brief. It stood for a heartbeat, sunlight catching the damp curve of its neck, before sagging back down into the grass. Jonah laughed then, a short, broken sound that surprised him as much as anyone. Tears blurred his vision, and he didn't bother to wipe them away. The mare turned to him fully at last. She stepped aside, not far, just enough. It was not forgiveness. It was an invitation heavy with risk. Jonah rose slowly, his joints stiff, his heart loud in his ears, and took one careful step forward. Night came down hard on the valley, not gently but with intent, as if the sky itself had chosen a side. Clouds dragged low over the hills, swallowing the last traces of color, and the wind rose in uneven gusts that rattled the barn doors and set the cottonwoods whispering. Jonah lit the lantern and carried it out, the warm glow cutting a fragile tunnel through the dark. The mare stood inside the stall now, sides heaving, her body angled protectively around the foal, as though the walls themselves could not be trusted. The foal lay on a bed of fresh straw, smaller somehow than it had been in daylight, its breathing shallow and fast. Jonah crouched just outside the stall, close enough to feel the heat rolling off them, far enough to respect the line the mare still guarded. He could see the tremor running through the foal's legs, the way its muscles fired and failed in quiet desperation. Every instinct in him screamed to intervene, to fix what was broken with his hands, but he knew better than to mistake motion for help. Rain began as a fine hiss against the roof, then thickened into a steady drumming that filled the space between thoughts. The mare shifted restlessly, hooves scraping, her eyes rolling white, when thunder cracked overhead. Jonah spoke then, not to calm her but to anchor himself. His voice was low, almost swallowed by the storm, words dissolving into tone and rhythm rather than meaning. He told her about the hills greening in spring, about the way frost gave way if he waited long enough. He told her nothing and everything at once. Hours passed in fragments. The foal tried to nurse and failed. The mare nickered softly, nudging, urging life forward with the patience of something that had already surrendered its pride. Jonah felt the familiar helplessness rise in him, the same suffocating sense he had known in hospital rooms and empty kitchens. He pressed his palm flat against the stall door, grounding himself in the rough grain of the wood, and breathed until the urge to flee dulled into something he could carry. Near midnight, the storm reached its peak. Wind slammed against the barn so hard the lantern swung, throwing wild shadows across the walls. The foal convulsed suddenly, a sharp, frightening spasm that left it gasping. The mare cried out, a raw, tearing sound that cut through Jonah like wire. He was moving before thought caught up, stepping into the stall despite the risk, his hands raised, his heart thundering louder than the rain. The mare wheeled, muscles coiled, but she did not strike. She froze, caught between terror and trust, her breath hot against Jonah's face. He stopped inches from her, his body a question mark, and waited. Time narrowed to that single suspended moment. Then, slowly, impossibly, she stepped aside. Jonah dropped to his knees beside the foal. Up close, the damage was unmistakable. Joints twisted inward, tendons weak and uncooperative, a body built with errors that no amount of care could erase. The foal's eye opened, cloudy but searching, and fixed on him. Jonah swallowed hard. He did not reach for the legs. He did not try to straighten what could not be straightened. Instead, he slid his jacket beneath the foal's chest, lifting just enough to ease its breathing, offering warmth and pressure and presence. The foal's shuddering slowed. Its breath evened, fraction by fragile fraction. Jonah felt the mare's breath on the back of his neck, felt her weight as she leaned toward him, sharing the vigil, Thunder rolled away into the distance, leaving only rain and the small, stubborn sounds of life insisting on itself. Jonah laughed again, quietly this time, a sound threaded with disbelief. He had come here to manage a ranch, to keep fences mended and days predictable. He had not come to be needed like this. Just before dawn, the rain tapered off. The sky lightened to a bruised gray, and the storm loosened its grip on the land. Jonah shifted carefully, muscles aching, and felt the foal stir beneath his jacket. It pushed, awkward and determined, legs scrambling for purchase. Jonah held his breath, afraid to hope, afraid not to. The mare watched, utterly still, every ounce of her attention trained on the small body between them. The foal rose. Not gracefully, not fully, but enough. It stood trembling, a living question mark, then swayed and collapsed back into straw with a huff of surprise. Jonah exhaled a sob he hadn't known he was holding. The mare lowered her head and touched her nose to Jonah's shoulder. Just once, a gesture so simple it nearly broke him. Sunlight broke through the clouds, thin and pale, spilling into the stall. Eli appeared at the door, hat in his hands, eyes soft with something like awe. He did not speak. He did not need to. Jonah looked down at the foal, at the mare standing guard not against him now but with him, and felt a shift deep in his chest, a quiet click into place. He understood then that survival was not the same as saving, and that sometimes the bravest thing was to stay without guarantees. The foal breathed, the mare stood, and Jonah remained on his knees in the straw as the day began, knowing with absolute clarity that none of them would ever be the same again. Morning settled into the valley with a softness that felt earned. The storm had rinsed the dust from the air, leaving the world sharpened and clean, every sound carrying farther than it should. Jonah stepped out of the barn as the sun climbed, its light catching on puddles and broken clouds, and for the first time in years he noticed how wide the sky really was. Behind him, the mare shifted in her stall, calm now, her breathing steady, the foal sleeping in a crooked sprawl that looked almost peaceful if he didn't stare too long. People came without being asked. Eli returned with coffee that steamed in the chill, setting the cup down beside Jonah without a word. Later, a pickup rolled up and stopped at the fence. Then another. No one crossed the line uninvited. They stood and watched, hands in pockets, hats pulled low, as if proximity alone might help. Jonah felt something loosen in his chest at the sight of them. Not relief exactly, but recognition. He was no longer holding the weight alone. By noon, the foal was awake again, struggling with the same stubborn resolve. Jonah fashioned a sling from canvas and rope, his hands remembering skills he hadn't known he kept. He worked slowly, explaining nothing, letting the mare see every movement. When he slid the sling beneath the foal's belly and eased attention, the foal's legs found the ground. It wobbled, steadied, leaned into the pressure like a child learning to trust gravity. The mare circled them both, eyes bright, a low hum vibrating in her chest. A boy appeared at the fence, skinny and quiet, his jacket too big for him. He didn't ask permission, he just waited. Jonah caught his eye and nodded once. The boy stepped closer, stopping where the grass turned to dirt, his gaze fixed on the foal. He held out an apple without speaking. Jonah took it, sliced it thin, and placed the pieces in his palm. The foal's muzzle brushed his skin, warm and damp, and the boy let out a breath he'd been holding for a long time. Days folded into each other. The foal learned the limits of its body, and then, slowly, how to work around them. It fell often. It always tried again. Jonah slept in the barn, waking to small sounds, learning the cadence of the mare's watchfulness. He found himself humming as he worked, a habit from a life before grief hollowed him out. The ranch changed in ways that didn't show up on ledgers. Laughter appeared where silence had lived. People lingered after chores, finding reasons to stay. The vet came and shook her head, gentle but honest. The foal would never be whole. There would be pain, setbacks, a careful calculus of good days and bad. Jonah listened and nodded, absorbing the facts without flinching. After she left, he sat with the mare in the late light, the foal sleeping between them. He rested his forehead against the mare's neck and closed his eyes. He wasn't bargaining. He wasn't pleading. He was deciding. The first real test came weeks later, on a morning too bright for fear. The foal had grown stronger, its muscles knitting determination into every flawed step. Jonah loosened the sling just a little, watching closely. The mare paced, tense but trusting. The foal stood. It took one step, then another, unassisted, awkward and magnificent. Jonah felt the sound leave his body before he could stop it, a shout that cracked open the air. The people of the fence erupted, clapping hands over mouths, tears unguarded. In that moment, something finished breaking inside Jonah, and something else took its place. He saw the path stretching forward, not smooth or certain, but real. A space where broken animals could learn how to live without being fixed. A place where broken people could stand beside them and learn the same lesson. He saw children finding courage in crooked legs, veterans sleeping through the night with the sound of breathing nearby, parents exhaling for the first time in years. The mare approached Jonah then, slow and deliberate. She pressed her forehead to his chest and stayed there. He wrapped his arms around her neck, feeling the strength beneath the scars, the heat of life shared freely. The foal leaned into his leg, solid and warm, and Jonah laughed, the sound full and unafraid. The sky widened above them, generous and blue. That evening, as the sun bled out behind the hills, Jonah stood at the fence and watched the foal navigate the uneven ground. Each step, a quiet victory. He understood now what the mare had known from the beginning. Protection wasn't about keeping the world away. It was about staying long enough to teach it how to see. Years later, the ranch no longer felt like the edge of something forgotten. It breathed now, wide and welcoming, its fences mended not just with wire but with intention. The sign at the gate was simple, hand-painted, the letters uneven as if they'd been learned slowly. Open. People came from miles away, some carrying stories too heavy to say aloud, others carrying nothing at all, which was often worse. They were met with the smell of hay and coffee, with the sound of hooves on packed earth, with the quiet understanding that no one here would ask them to be anything other than present. The foal had grown into herself without apology. Her legs never straightened the way textbooks promise, but they grew strong in their own stubborn geometry. She learned where the ground dipped and rose, learned how to place her weight. So pain didn't get the final word. Children gravitated to her first. They always did. She stood still for them, lowering her head, letting small hands find courage in her mane. A boy who hadn't spoken in 2 years whispered her name one afternoon, and then laughed, startled by his own voice. No one clapped. No one made a moment. They let it be his. Veterans arrived next, men and women with eyes trained on exits, shoulders held tight against memories that didn't loosen easily. Jonah watched them sit in the shade, backs against the barn, breathing in time with the animals. One man slept through the night for the first time in decades, his boots by the bed, his dreams finally unarmed. He woke and cried into his hands, and Jonah sat with him until the sun came up, saying nothing, understanding everything. The mare grew gray around the eyes. She moved slower, chose her spots carefully, but her presence still shaped the space. She watched the comings and goings with calm authority, her trust in Jonah complete and unremarkable, as if it had always been so. In the evenings, when the light softened and the day's edges blurred, Jonah would rest his forehead against hers and feel the quiet miracle of being allowed this close. Jonah himself had changed in ways that didn't announce themselves. He laughed more easily. He slept without bracing. He stopped flinching at happiness, stopped waiting for it to be taken away. The ranch taught him what grief never could, that brokenness was not a verdict, that care was not wasted simply because it did not cure. He built shelters, schedules, a rhythm that held people when they could not hold themselves. He learned when to step forward and when to step back, when presence was the only medicine that mattered. On a late autumn afternoon, the foal, no longer a foal, really, stood at the fence with Jonah as the valley filled with gold. She leaned into him, solid and warm, and he rested his arm across her neck. The mare grazed nearby, unbothered, certain. Wind moved through the grass like a long exhale. Jonah felt whole in a way that did not erase his past, but placed it gently behind him. He thought of that foggy morning, of the choice to stay without guarantees, and understood the truth he'd been circling ever since. Some miracles do not arrive shining and complete. They arrive wounded and weary, asking for patience, asking for courage, asking us to see worth where the world expects loss. And when we stay, the healing does not belong to one life alone. It spreads. It roots. It becomes a place others can come home to. The screen fades to black, but the quiet lingers, as if the story isn't finished with you yet. Jonah stands alone at the fence one last time, not because he is lonely, but because solitude has finally become a place of rest instead of exile. The mare lifts her head from the grass and looks toward him, and he smiles without thinking. He has learned that healing does not announce itself with certainty. It arrives softly, wearing the shape of responsibility and grace. The valley exhales. Somewhere behind him, laughter drifts from the barn, unforced and real. Jonah does not turn around right away. He lets the sound find him, lets it settle where grief once lived. He knows now that staying changed him more than leaving ever could. He knows that love is not proven by perfection, but by presence again and again, even when the outcome is unclear. The image holds for a beat longer than expected. Then, gently, the invitation appears. Now, click on the video on the screen to hear a story even more miraculous than this one. You'll cry, and then feel whole again. Click it now, we'll be waiting. The light softens further, slipping toward evening, and Jonah finally turns from the fence. He walks back toward the barn at an unhurried pace, boots scuffing familiar ground. Every step carrying the quiet certainty that he belongs to this place and this work. Behind him, the mare and her grown foal remain silhouetted against the sky. Imperfect, steady, unafraid. They do not follow. They don't need to. What they gave has already taken root. As the doors close and the sound of the ranch settle into their nighttime rhythm, the story does what all true stories must. It loosens its grip. It leaves you with an ache that isn't pain, but recognition. The understanding that sometimes the bravest thing is not rescuing, not fixing, not winning, but staying and letting love change the shape of what survival looks like. The screen holds for a breath longer. Now, click on the video on the screen to hear a story even more miraculous than this one. You'll cry and then feel whole again. Click it now, we'll be waiting.